Sup, guys? It's Toad back with you Saturday morning here. Let me fix this lighting here. Yeah, there we go. That's a little bit better. Swing the ring lights. Swing the ring. Uh, what's up, everybody? It's Toad back with you. Better Off Dead Saturday. It is the final college basketball weekend, really, of championship week, I guess. And what do we want to say? It's the final week before the actual tournament is in play, and the NIT is going to be going on as well. And I usually do have a couple of plays early in the NIT. I will see how it goes, but I'll talk about that when we get to the NIT. But we're going to talk about college basketball. I went 2-1 yesterday. College basketball still continues to be a nemesis. I mean, Purdue, I don't know what to tell you about that, man. One of the things I didn't even mention in my breakdown, well, a couple of things, is that game was being played in Indianapolis, which is an hour from Purdue's campus. So you got to think that Purdue would have like kind of the crowd advantage there because their crowd only has to travel about an hour to get there. So that was another factor for Purdue. And then we also had the fact that Michigan State, even the games that they won, their last 7 wins, all in conference play, were by 4 points or less, and 9 of their 12 conference wins were by 4 points or less. So they were, I mean, that's been the knock on them, that Michigan had not won. Did I say Michigan State? I meant Michigan, if I did. Michigan has been winning all these close games, which makes them overrated, although I see that going both ways. I do think it makes them battle-tested. But yesterday, that was just a ridiculous game, man. It was just such outlier percentages. I'm not saying Purdue should have won the game, but it should have been closer than it was. I mean, Purdue shot like 30-something% from the floor. I mean, that's just unheard of for a team that's like a top 10 offensive efficiency team, and Michigan shot over 50%. I mean, I know Purdue isn't the greatest defensive team this year, but still, that's just absurd. So we move on from that. We did have UC Irvine in the very late game, which I wasn't that worried in that game at halftime because that was a game where UC Irvine hadn't played yet in the tournament, so I kind of expected a slow start. One of those games where like live betting might come into play where UC Irvine doesn't look good early on. You can get like a better number on UC Irvine and lay like less than the double digits that I lay, but I wasn't even worried about it because I'm like, well, UC Irvine's a fast-paced team. They're going to get in rhythm and hopefully just dominate the second half, and that is what they did. They wound up winning by 18. I think they were up by 20 right near the end there, so it wasn't really a sweat once it came down to it in the end. I really was not concerned about that one, and I'm always concerned. And then the Toronto Raptors was a win for me as well. They were winning most of that game, so my junk NBA plays continue to win. I have a little bit of a less junky NBA play today with my one NBA play. Andrew, what's up, man? Irvine, yeah, you said you live right near there. Are you a fan of the Anteaters? Are you rooting for them? It's a big game today, man. I'll talk about that in a minute. It's going to be an interesting one. It's going to be one of the best games of the day, I think. Charles, what's up, man? Thanks for hanging out. I'm going to have one play in each sport today, man. Just fairly selective. I don't see a whole lot of angles that I like in college basketball here, but we can get down to it. I'm assuming my audio's working because you guys are talking to me. I haven't checked. I usually just make sure that my audio's working. All right, yeah, it is. All right, let's get into today's card, man. College basketball, I mean, this is one of the best Saturdays of college basketball. We have a lot of semifinal and final games here in conference play. The Ivy League tournament starts today. As the Ivy League, they used to just go with the regular season winner gets the tournament bid, and I still think they kind of should do that because I think Yale deserves to get in, but Yale's going to have to play in the conference tournament here. Yale, there is a big gap between Yale and these other teams, but they draw the team that I still think is probably the second best team in the conference. They drew Princeton, who I guess is the 4 seed, so they actually draw Princeton in the first round of this tournament. And the other thing I really don't like about this Ivy tournament is that I think it's on a rotation where one of the Ivy League teams hosts it every year, and that could potentially be a team that's in the field. So like that's kind of an unfair advantage. Like if you happen to have the 4 seed hosting, like that's what the American East used to do. I think that's dumb. That's gay. Like why should the 4 seed get a huge advantage over the 1 seed? Luckily this year that's not the case because this is at the Pizzitola Sports Center, which is Brown's home arena in Providence, Rhode Island. Brown did not qualify for this tournament, so we don't have to worry about that. So this is a neutral site. pretty much for all these teams. Princeton and Yale, I mean, again, unfortunately, this really should be the finals matchup, but whatever. Yale is down from an 8-point favorite to a 7-point favorite with juice, but they have 71% of tickets, 95% of the cash coming in on Yale. I do think the public is probably going to tend to come in on Yale. This is an early start at 11 Eastern, so in a little over an hour, we're going to have 2 of these games tipping off. Yale, they beat Princeton, just absolutely dominated them in both games, actually. Or no, dominated them in one game, excuse me. They won on the road, but they did win both games. The game on the road, actually, I think was a little bit misleading, even though Yale was winning this entire game. Yale shot ridiculously in this game. And Princeton had a pretty bad shooting game, but the turnovers being pretty heavily in favor of Princeton kind of helped Princeton out in that game. Yale, I mean, they were still the better team there, and then Yale had an easy win at home. I mean, Yale is the better team. I hope that they win because I think they deserve to get into the tournament. I expect that they will win. But Princeton, again, had a horrific shooting game in that second game at Yale as well. I believe Yale won the rebound battle in both games. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Yale is still the better team, though. I mean, I don't have a whole lot else to say about this. The other interesting thing here, though, is that Yale finished the season on 3 straight road games, but look at what their last game was, at Brown. So Yale just played their last game in this same arena, and that was March 8th. So it was a week ago, but still, that means Yale might have a little bit of an extra advantage here because they literally just played in the same arena. So these teams are all used to it because they all have to play here. I mean, everybody plays at everybody else's arena in the Ivy during the season, but still Yale has the most recent familiarity with it because they were the last team that played at Brown. So a little bit of a weird situation there. It makes it a little bit of an extra maybe edge there for Yale. Princeton beat Penn to finish the season. I think I was on Princeton in that game. It was a spot that made sense to play Princeton there. Don't have a whole lot else to say. Yale should win this game, but we will see. The other game I have is actually going to be my play. Anna, what's up? Thanks for hanging out. Cornell minus 5.5 is my only play in college basketball here. They're up from 4.5 to 5.5, and I know Ken Bum has this number somewhere in the 4 range, so I know we're maybe not getting a whole lot of value here, but I just think the spot makes sense to play Cornell. 79% of tickets, 98% of the cash coming in on Cornell. They're playing Dartmouth, and Dartmouth, since the Ivy has gone to the 4-team tournament, I don't even know if Dartmouth has ever made it into this thing. So that means, as a program, they're not really as used to being here. These other 3 teams are pretty much perennial contenders in the Ivy. So you see Princeton, Yale, Cornell, usually Harvard. You see those teams get into this thing all the time. Brown has kind of entered the fray recently as well. Dartmouth never gets into these things, man. So I think it's going to be almost like a fish out of water situation. But the other thing that I like about this is that Cornell, the last time they played Dartmouth, they lost 88-49, dude, at Dartmouth. So Cornell, this is a major, not really revenge, but readjustment spot. I think the revenge is going to come into play a little bit. I think it is going to be a factor, even though, of course, this is a tournament game. Everybody wants to win. But that game, that was just an absurd result in that game, man. Cornell was a 3.5-point road favorite at Dartmouth, and they lost the game by almost 40 points. Absolutely embarrassing. You know that Cornell remembers that. That was their worst loss of the year. That's going to give them extra motivation here. Look at the statistics in this game. Dartmouth shot 44.1% from 3. Cornell, 27.9% from the field and 11.1% from 3. And yeah, Dartmouth dominated the rebounds against them, but still, that type of shooting is not going to happen again, man. Cornell, pretty much what they do is shoot well. That is what they do. They're a good offensive team. So this was, I think, a major outlier here. So I like Cornell. Cornell did win the game at home. This game is, of course, on the neutral. But Cornell is obviously the better team. I think the home game for Cornell is more indicative of what we're going to see here. It was a situation that was less fluky, let's say. These percentages weren't as crazy as those ones in that first game. I think you're going to see a dramatic progression back to the mean as far as Cornell's shooting. I don't see it any other way here. Cornell did finish the season hot, I know, and Dartmouth lost their last game, so you don't really like to play on teams that ended the season hot, but I just see no way that Cornell doesn't show up in this game after having their worst loss of the season against this Dartmouth team. So, and Cornell, again, they're the team that kind of belongs here, whereas Dartmouth, I don't want to say that they don't. I mean, they had a decent season, unexpectedly good, but I just think this is where the road ends for them. And if you want to look at the KenPom numbers, I mean, Cornell, they're 64th in the entire country in offensive efficiency. They're a really good offensive team. They're not a good defensive team. They're low in the luck index, although Dartmouth also is. Where's Dartmouth at? Let me see. I think Dartmouth also is. Yeah, both teams are really low in luck index. Both teams play fast. So that's the other thing. There's not going to be like a pacing collision here where like the lesser team is going to have the ability to slow down the better team. That's not going to happen here either because Dartmouth likes to play fast, but so does Cornell, and Cornell is just the better team at it. They're the way better scoring team. Dartmouth's offense is terrible. They're like bottom 60th in offense. They do actually play defense, which is kind of a weird profile. A defensive team that also plays fast, which, I mean, that is kind of like what St. John's does, but we're not looking at St. John's here. We're looking at Dartmouth. They're not very good. 194th overall. And then where did he have Cornell at? 132nd. So he's got Cornell about 60-something ranking spots higher. Not really a surprise. We know Cornell's the better team, but yeah, give me Cornell in that game. We got the Atlantic 10 continuing with Loyola Chicago off a nice win over St. Louis in the quarterfinals, but they're up against VCU, and VCU played the earliest game. Both of these teams played earlier in the day. That's kind of how these conferences that go, one day after the other get structured, where the teams that play the earliest two games then play again in the earlier game the next day. So it's not really much of a rest advantage for either team, but Loyola Chicago did play the later game yesterday out of the two against a better team in St. Louis, and that was a game that was fairly close down the stretch. St. Louis made a nice comeback in that game. VCU had a much easier win in their game, so I think VCU, they will have the rest advantage coming in here, and they are the better team. 9.5 is a bit high, I would say. I mean, that's a pretty big number, although the odds makers are telling you this VCU team is good. I've been saying it all year that they're the best team in the Atlantic 10. They deserve to get the auto bid here from this conference. I mean, I hate seeing these favorites get knocked out, man. Like basically the top team in the conference. I hate seeing them get knocked out. Hopefully it's not going to happen in many of these conferences. VCU, 9.5-point favorite, 52% of tickets, 58% of the cash on Loyola. I mean, the cash coming in on Loyola, I mean, yeah, it could be more of a numbers play because I do think the number for a game like this is a little bit high, especially when I think both teams are going to kind of be in like a slower game here. I mean, the total is down from 140 to 137. That's the other thing I should mention, that in these semifinal and final games, you want to mostly look towards unders because, I mean, these games, you're going to see more intense defense. I mean, it's an elimination game. Both teams want to win. Both teams focus on defensive intensity, don't want to make mistakes on offense. So you want to look towards unders in most of these games, in my opinion, even though I'm not really much of a totals player. That kind of goes for any sport, though. So I don't really have that much of a read on that one. I prefer St. Joe's in the game against George Mason here. This is a situation where you have the lower seed actually being the favorite here because the odds makers are telling you George Mason is overrated, as I've been telling you all year. George Mason really has had an easy path in the tournament so far. They beat Richmond, I think, and then George Washington, or maybe the only game they played so far is against George Washington. Is that right? I don't know. I forget. But they haven't faced anybody as good as St. Joe's yet in this tournament, so now they're really having to step up in class. St. Joe's, they are playing a third game in 3 days, though, so you could see a little bit of fatigue maybe on St. Joe's side, as they had a close call against LaSalle, I think, who's their in-city little brother. They escaped there, which is why I liked St. Joe's yesterday, but they had a big win yesterday against Dayton. Dayton is a team that will, like, grind you down and play defense. That was a tough, more physical game, so George Mason does have a little bit of a rest advantage here, which is why I don't quite want to do this, but I still lean to the St. Joe's side because I think they're the better team, and based on the team's records and seeding, it almost looks too easy to grab George Mason line as an underdog, but that's the odds makers telling you St. Joe's is actually the better team. They're up from 1.5 to 1 with juice. 63% of tickets, down from 1.5 to 1 with juice. 63% of tickets, 90% of the cash, though, coming in on St. Joe's. I do think the money is coming in on them. But not going to be a play for me. None of the rest of these games are plays for me. Big Ten, huge games here. Wisconsin, Michigan State. This is a big game. This is a rematch from a game not that long ago. Michigan State won at home against Wisconsin. And I think Michigan State was about a 4.5 point favorite there. So the line being up to 3 looks a little bit high to me in this game. Michigan State, yeah, they're the better team. Wisconsin played that game really close. I know Michigan State won by 9, but Wisconsin was in that game. I mean, that was like a 2-point game with a couple minutes left. And then Michigan State, they did what they seem to do quite often, and that's they stall you out, man. They start playing really, really tough defense right at the end of the game and just pretty much just completely stop you. So this Michigan State team, yeah, defensively, they're really good. They're up from 1.5 with juice to 3 in this one, 72% of tickets, 79% of the cash. Both teams coming off wins yesterday. I think Michigan State played the earlier of the 2 games. I don't know if any of that really matters that much. Both teams looked good yesterday. I think maybe Wisconsin's going to get a little bit more credit for beating UCLA than Michigan State will for beating Oregon, but I don't know because Oregon is ranked, so I don't know. But Wisconsin was the lesser of the 2 favorites yesterday, and they got the job done as well. A fairly easy win for Wisconsin. Pretty dominant win, actually. The way that I would look in this game, I mean, I do think the line is a little bit high, even though it does look at the cash percentages on Michigan State. Looks like the money is coming in that way. I would slightly disagree with that. I think I would lean towards taking the points with Wisconsin, but I think the under is the better play here. 57% of tickets, 62% of the cash on the under. It's up from 144.5 to 145.5. Slightly juiced to the under. The total is pretty close to where it was in that game at Michigan State. So really, I think the total needs to be lower in a semifinal game like this, man, because you know the teams are going to come out and really focus on defense, just like I said. So usually you'll see this game be a little bit lower scoring than what the regular season matchup was. And the regular season game didn't even come close to this. The regular season game, I think, landed 133. And the lined total in that game was like in the 140s, though. It obviously landed way under. But now in a semifinals game, we're still seeing the line almost the same as it was at Michigan State. I don't really agree with that. Michigan State plays really, really good 3-point defense. And I know Wisconsin shot really, really abysmally from 3 in that game against Michigan State. So kind of an outlier such that you'll probably see Wisconsin shoot better from 3 in this game than they did in that game. But still, I don't expect them to be great from 3-point range because Michigan State is one of the best defensive teams against the 3. Wisconsin takes a ton of 3s, so the defensive matchup is good for Michigan State. Wisconsin has a really good 2-point defense, and Michigan State mostly plays 2-point offense. They don't take that many 3s, so both defenses actually match up pretty well in this game, so I think the under does make sense. And I think both teams are probably going to be okay to play a slower pace game here. Both of these teams play like kind of mid-tempo. Wisconsin plays a little bit faster than Michigan State does. Wisconsin may want to try to run, which is the one thing that kind of scares me about the under just a little bit, is that because Michigan State probably wants to try to slow this game down, Wisconsin might try to run because they have done that more than you ever see out of Wisconsin. They've tried to go a bit faster this year with this style of offense, but we will see, man. So those are my thoughts on that game. Michigan and Maryland, both teams with really good-looking wins yesterday. Maryland absolutely blasted Illinois yesterday. Really, really crazy. And then Michigan played the later game and beat me in a game where I think you're going to see some regression out of Michigan, man. After that shooting performance, they're not going to shoot 50-something% again, man. Maryland up from 4 to 4.5 with juice. 78% of tickets, 86% of the cash coming in on Maryland. Even though I saw that Maryland blowout over Illinois, and I was thinking, man, Maryland's probably going to be overvalued in the next round, but I'm not even sure that I think that at this point because Michigan shot out of their minds yesterday. And I think the Maryland win was actually less deceiving than the Michigan win. And nobody's really going to care that Maryland beat Illinois. I mean, nobody thinks that Illinois is that good. I think people are going to weigh Michigan's win over Purdue way stronger because Purdue is that like really known quantity. So to me, I think the public might even come in and maybe give Michigan too much credit after that. So I do agree with this line move. I would slightly lean to Maryland in that game. They are the better team. They're very young, though, so maybe a little bit less experience. I think the coaching edge probably does go to Michigan, though, with Dusty May there. Southeastern Conference, the SEC, it's what everybody wanted, man. The top 4 teams are all still in this thing into the semifinals. This is what everybody wanted. Tennessee, Auburn, Alabama, and Florida are all still alive here. Tennessee, Alabama, Florida. At this point, one of those three teams is going to be the final one seed. That may still be up for grabs here. So those three teams actually might have more to play for than Auburn does. I think regardless of what Auburn does at this point, they're going to get a one seed. I mean, I think probably they're going to get the overall one seed regardless. If they lose to any of these three teams that are remaining, it's not going to knock them that much, man. So I think Auburn pretty much has the number one seed wrapped up. So now the question is, how much do they care about winning the SEC? Whereas these three other teams, I think, have more reason to show up here because they're all trying to get that last one seed. If they care about that, I think they do care about that more than really not having a whole lot to play for at this point. Other than I think Auburn, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Auburn lost in the SEC in this tournament last year. Like I seem to remember them losing to Florida late in the tournament, but do I have that wrong, or did they wind up winning the tournament? I forget. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look, but I don't think it's that relevant here. Auburn's up from 4 to 5.5, but they got 51% of tickets, 69% of the cash coming in at Tennessee. The total's up from 136.5 to 140.5, but you got to think this is going to be a pretty defensive matchup, man. I mean, any game with Tennessee is a defensive matchup. The first game between these teams was ridiculously low scoring. Both teams didn't get out of the 50s, which was Tennessee was at Auburn, I believe, the first time these teams played. Oh, and I guess I'll point out one more time. Big Ten is being played at Indianapolis. SEC is playing in Nashville. A-10 is playing in Washington, D.C., so I didn't even call that out, but I've been calling every day. But yeah, Tennessee actually only lost to Auburn by a few points at Auburn in a very low-scoring game. But I don't know if this game's going to go that much differently, to be honest. I mean, that's just kind of the way these Tennessee games go, even though Auburn might try to speed this game up because Tennessee really wants to try to slow it down. Auburn is certainly the better offensive team here. Tennessee is the better defensive team, but Auburn's still also quite good on the defensive end. So in the end, I do think you're probably going to see a defensive game here, similar to the first game. I don't know it's going to be that low scoring, but with the total up from 136.5 to 140.5, I think looking towards the under might make sense, even though you do see 66% of tickets and 75% of the cash on the over. I don't really agree with that, and I don't agree with this move either. I agree with the cash percentage on Tennessee. You're looking at the better defense, technically getting points, and I think Tennessee is probably the slightly more motivated team here. So that is the way I lean. And remember, I mean, this game is in Tennessee. So Tennessee's crowd is going to show up there, though it's not like Auburn's that far away either. So both of these teams are going to be pretty well represented, really. And then Alabama and Florida. Florida's a 3.5-point favorite, and they are that for a reason. Florida is the better team. They're the more balanced team. Now, this is a game where the total's crazy high, up to 176, juice to the over, and that makes sense because both of these teams have really good offenses and they both like to play really fast. Florida, the issue that I have with the over is that Florida does play defense. Alabama does not, although you could see this game still wind up being high scoring just because of the pace and how good the offense is, but it is a semifinal game, so I would hesitate to really want to look towards an over in this game. That plus Florida has the better defense, and that is also why I lean to Florida here, because I think when it comes down to like a semifinal game like this, you're looking at two teams that are pretty comparable as far as how good they are in offense. But the defense, there's a big gap, in my opinion. Florida is the way better defense. So that would be the way I would lean in this game just because of that. 53% of the cash and tickets on Florida. The lines was slightly down from 3.5 to 3.5 with reduced juice. But I would lean to Florida in that game. Not a play for me. Now we get out of what's probably going to be some of the best games that we'll see to some terrible games at Dickies Arena in Fort Worth, Texas, which I guess must be Dickies, like the clothing company, the jean company, whatever else they make. They make jeans. I do know that. Fort Worth, Texas. Going to be maybe a little bit of an advantage to North Texas from the location. Memphis got a really good draw in this tournament, man. I've been saying I don't think Memphis is that good. They're a horrible, like turnover machine on offense. They turn the ball over horribly. I think Penny Hardaway is a terrible coach, but Memphis gets a really easy draw here, man. They get to play Tulane, who I guess is the 4 seed in this tournament. I don't even remember who they beat yesterday, but Tulane is not a great team. I think they beat, did they beat Wichita? Maybe. So Memphis beat Wichita. I don't even know who Tulane beat. So Memphis got a little bit of revenge on Wichita. Memphis did have a close call, actually, if I remember correctly, against Wichita in the previous game. So that might focus Memphis a little bit more. They are down from 9 to 8.5, but 67% of tickets, 69% of the cash coming in on Memphis. Because Memphis had a pretty bad game against Wichita, Tulane, really not a good team. I would have to probably lean to Memphis in this one, even though I don't think they're very good. They get a really easy draw here, in my opinion. And then UAB and North Texas, these are the 3 and 2 seeds in the conference. And these, I think there's a big gap after the top 3 teams in this conference. UAB and North Texas are both pretty good. Memphis is pretty good. I mean, it's as far as the American is concerned, at the very least. And everybody else, there's like a big drop off there. So this should be a good game. North Texas up from 2.5 to 3. 50% of tickets, 78% of the cash coming in on UAB. So it looks like some money is coming in on UAB. I think both of these teams won really easily yesterday. So there isn't really a whole lot of a situational edge here. The money looks like it's coming in on UAB, like I said, but we're looking at a game that's in Fort Worth, so it's fairly close to Denton, Texas, where North Texas is. So they might have a little bit more of a crowd here in this game, although UAB, I mean, they're unknown quantity, so their crowd is probably going to travel to this thing as well. UAB won this conference tournament last year, and they stole a bid in the tournament last year because Memphis got an at-large bid, I'm pretty sure, and UAB stole the other bid. If I remember, am I right about that? I think I am. Memphis was in the tournament, were they? I'm pretty sure they were. I can't even remember at this point, man. I think Memphis was in one of those like 8-9 games. That's where they usually land, and I always pick against them, and I think they got knocked out somewhere. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm usually the guy that's so autistic that I remember like every bracket structure because I can like visualize it, but I don't remember where Memphis was. I do know UAB got in and they won this conference last year, so maybe a little bit of extra motivation for these teams to try to beat UAB. North Texas plays a really, really ugly style, though. They're one of the slowest paces in the country, and they get themselves into so many low-scoring games. And UAB they're not opposed to playing that style. UAB also, I think, likes to play slow, so they're not going to be thrown off by that. So the matchup isn't really that great for North Texas as far as they won't really have a matchup against a team that they can slow down and like really make uncomfortable because UAB kind of also wants to play that style. But I don't really agree with the cash percentage here, though. Like, I think I would probably lean to North Texas. I think they are the slightly better team. And for all the other reasons that I just said, I think North Texas, teams are going to be gunning for UAB a little bit just because they won this tournament last year, so we'll see. And then the Big 12 is actually the championship game, which is Arizona and Houston. Houston, Juwan Roberts is not going to play in this game, so I mentioned him yesterday. He's one of Houston's most experienced players. He's been on the team for like 3 years. He is one of their better players, one of their starters, and he sprained his ankle, I believe, 2 games ago. So he didn't play yesterday, and they won without him, which kind of was an injured player at their spot. I mentioned yesterday I liked Houston in the game yesterday. I thought BYU's run was going to come to an end. It did. Houston, the significantly better team over BYU. Houston won pretty easily yesterday without Roberts. But now in this next game, it might be a little bit of a backslide, man, because, again, it's that injured player theory spot where first game that guy is out, you tend to step up your game a little bit, but then the next game, you tend to, like, slide a little bit. So we could see a little bit of that effect here with Houston. Houston is obviously still the better team, even without Roberts, though. Down from 7 to 5.5 with Juice, though, so it looks like the market read is all over the Arizona side as far as taking the points. 67% of tickets, only 61% of the cash on Houston. Money coming in on Arizona. And in the Kelvin Sampson era, we've seen this many, many times where Houston just basically just doesn't even show up in the conference championship game. Like, they're pretty much like, oh, we already have a 1 seed, basically, so we're just not going to show up. That's what they did when they were in the American Athletic, and they lost the final game to Memphis. And then last year they did it again, and they got absolutely annihilated by Iowa State in this Big 12 championship game. But it was because Houston already had accomplished their goals. But the other reason was that Houston does this because they want to try to get healthy. So they kind of just throw the conference championship game to try to get healthy for the actual tournament. And I think that might be what we're going to see here, where we know that Roberts isn't going to play because they're going to try to get healthy. I don't know if Houston's going to start pulling any of their other starters. I don't know why. I don't know if this line is moved just based on Roberts or if there's something else going on here. But I would take the points with Arizona here just based on Houston's recent history in games like this and the fact that they're trying to get healthy and the fact that yesterday was kind of that big game with the injured player at their spot. I mean, yeah, ideally you'd like to be the Big 12 champion, but I think what Houston's going to do is probably like come out here and not like really try to exert themselves. Arizona, I think, might want this game a little bit more. Arizona did play the later game last night, though. I forget who they beat last night. Texas Tech. I thought Texas Tech was going to beat them, man. Arizona pulled off that win. So Houston does have a little bit of a rest advantage here, though, because they didn't really have to put in a whole lot of effort yesterday to beat BYU, and they played the earlier game. So I'll stay off of this game. I would lean to taking the points with Arizona. And then we got the Mountain West. This is crazy, man, because Boise State and Colorado State are in the Mountain West Championship game, man. And these two teams both came into this thing fighting to try to get into the tournament, and now one of these teams is going to get an automatic bid, and the other team is maybe going to have a case to get into the tournament. So Boise is up from a pick'em to a pick'em with juice. 65% of tickets, only 50% of the cash on Colorado State. So it looks like Colorado State's a little bit public. The money is coming in, driving the line up on Boise. Here's the thing, though. Even though the market read looks like it's on Boise, I think Boise's win yesterday was a little bit bigger because they beat New Mexico. And I think Boise beating New Mexico, I think that win gets them into the tournament, man. I think even if they lose this game, they're going to be in the tournament now because they were already on that bubble, and now they got that win over New Mexico. So I think Colorado State actually has more to play for here because Colorado State, yeah, they beat Utah State yesterday, but I think that's not enough to get them in. I think Utah State's going to be sweating a little bit, although I think they'll probably still get in. Colorado State, I think they need this game more. I think they need to win this game to get into the tournament, although both teams might kind of be of that mindset that we want to make sure that we're going to be in the tournament. So in that case, maybe it does come down to which team is the better team. I think Boise is the slightly better team here. But if you look at KenPom, it's actually crazy. These teams are right, like one on top of the other in KenPom's rankings right now. Look at this. Boise is 44, Colorado State's 45, and look at the rankings. These teams are both better on offense than defense, but it's pretty close. They both have very similar rankings, very similar tempo, pretty similar in luck index. Colorado State a little bit more lucky, and similar strength of schedule too. So these teams are very, very similar. It's crazy. You could like hide their names and look at these two teams. They have the same overall record. To hide these names and look at these numbers for these two teams, there's no way you'd be able to tell the difference between these two teams. And this is on a neutral site, so this is as close as it gets, man. This is going to be a good game. I do think the need is a little bit stronger for Colorado State, though, because I think they may not get in if they don't win this game. I think Boise, if they do win, if they don't win, I mean, I think they're still in because they beat New Mexico. So we will see. Colorado State played the later game last night, though. That wasn't even last night. That was this morning. It was midnight Eastern. It was the last game on the schedule. I was asleep before it ended. Colorado State, they had a good game in that game. They won it easily. And I should have mentioned, I don't do a whole lot with futures, but I should have mentioned the one future that I actually liked in the conference tournament. And you can, I'm not lying. You can ask my group chat what I said about this. I said Colorado State, I liked them to win the Mountain West because I liked the path for them going through, like Utah State was basically the most, that was like the biggest like team that they were going to have to face. And they got to avoid San Diego State, Boise State, and New Mexico, who are all on the other side of the bracket there. And also that means Boise State has gone through more of a gauntlet here, man, because they've beaten San Diego State and New Mexico. So Boise had to beat like a slow grinding team, kind of similar to what they are. Then they had to beat a fast-paced New Mexico team last night. So Boise's path has been more difficult. So they might be a little bit more of the tired team here as well. So I actually don't agree with this line move. I would slightly lean to Colorado State. Not just because I liked Colorado State the whole time to begin with. And by the way, books, I think I mentioned this yesterday, but as far as futures, books don't really give you the greatest odds on the futures because all of them futures are, yes, this team will win, so they don't offer you the no option. So they're kind of screwing you as far as the price that they're giving you on that, even though it looks pretty nice because it's plus money. But once like you get to like the beginning of the tournament, the way that I would actually do it is do a rollover bet instead of playing the future. So that means you're going to play the team that you like on that future. You're going to play them on the money line in every game. And maybe if they're a huge favorite in the first game, then maybe you don't want to play that one. You could skip that and then start doing the money line rollover in the next round or whatever. But what you do is you bet them on the money line. Then if they win, take all of the winnings from that and bet it on the money line again. And then at that point, if you don't like the next matchup in the next game or how it sets up in the next game, you can always just stop and then you've won money at that point. So that is the preferred approach. And if you do just go the whole way with it, you wind up winning more money than you would on the future. And your money is only tied up game per game instead of for a longer period of time. So that is the preferred approach. It's how the pros do it, baby. We got the Big East Championship game in Madison Square Garden here. Creighton and St. John's. Creighton played the later game yesterday, and they pulled off the win over UConn. Nice win for Creighton to get into this game. St. John's up from 5-7, so the money is coming in on St. John's. 67% of tickets, 77% of the cash coming in on St. John's. Again, they're playing in a preferred location for them in Madison Square Garden, man. They got the crowd there. I don't know the Creighton's crowd is going to have as much ability to travel here because they're here from Omaha. Although, I mean, they'll be decently represented, but St. John's is going to be packing the house, man. I mean, they're the local team pretty much here. They play some of their home games at Madison Square, so they're also the most used to the venue, although at this point, both these teams obviously are used to the venue, having gone through this tournament. But the money's coming in on St. John's, and I don't really have that much of a reason to disagree with this. I mean, St. John's, they just look unstoppable right now. And unless you have a good reason to fade them, which I don't really see that there's one in this game, I would just stay away from it. So I won't be fading them either. They had another easy win yesterday, I think, over Marquette, I believe. Actually, I think Marquette was beating them early in the game. Then St. John's just completely pulled away. St. John's, yeah, I mean, they're going to be a dangerous team in the tournament. I don't think they're the sixth best team in the country, which is where they're ranked right now, but they're good. I think maybe they're going to be a little bit overhyped, but they have Rick Pitino there now coaching, man. They have a really strong coach there now. I mean, this team, yeah, there's not a whole lot negative that you can say about St. John's, man. I mean, they've been really, really good, and even their losses have all been in close games. So they are going to be a dangerous team and hard to eliminate in the tournament, and I do think they want this thing. They haven't been in the Big East championship since 2000 or something like that. So that's how long it's been for this program. So I think they want to get this win. I think the game does mean something to them. But going through this tournament might mean they're going to be a little tired coming into the NCAA tournament. So at least for them, they're probably going to get a pretty weak team that they match up against in the first round. But we will see. Maybe that's not even. Maybe St. John's will be an early exit in the tournament. Who knows, man? We'll have to see how the bracket comes out tomorrow. Going to be a lot of fun. And then in the MAAC final, Mount St. Mary's and Iona. Iona up from 2-4 with juice. 72% of tickets, 74% of the cash. Money coming all in on Iona. I don't disagree with it. Iona is the better of these two teams, but Ken Baum doesn't have them that much the better team. He has the line closer to 2, I think. So the fact that it's up to 4, it's a little bit harder to lay. Iona, I mean, they're always a difficult team to get out of this tournament, man. This is in Atlantic City. And Mountain West, by the way, is in Las Vegas. I forgot to call that out. And Big 12 is in Kansas City, which I don't think those locations really matter that much. Iona, I do think they're the better team. Mount St. Mary's had the later game yesterday, and it was a close game where they upset Merrimack. And Merrimack actually went off like a 9-point favorite in that game, and the game was so low scoring. There was no way either team was going to win by margin in that game, and Mount St. Mary's came out of that game with the win. Iona pulled off a nice win over Quinnipiac, knocking the 1 seed out. So they knocked the 1 out. Mount St. Mary's knocked the 2 out. I do think Iona is probably one of the top few teams in this conference, though. Better than Mount St. Mary's is. So I do still like the Iona side. It's just that this number, I think, is a little bit too much to lay. But we may see Iona return to the tournament this year. And the winner of this is going to be probably in one of those 16-seed play-in games, though. I mean, this conference, the MAAC, really sucks this year. So that's just, it's just the way that it is. It's the reality of it. Even though Iona did get a big win yesterday over Quinnipiac, they actually had to put in less effort later in the game, and it was the earlier game, so they do have a little bit of a rest advantage in that game as well. In the MAC, as opposed to the MAAC, which is all in Cleveland, Ohio, we got two Ohio teams in the final here between Miami, Ohio, and Akron. Miami, Ohio knocked out Kent State yesterday, and I think Akron maybe is going to be happy about that because Kent State, they're one of the teams that I think matches up better against Akron because Kent State plays really good defense. So they have the ability to slow the game down, ugly it up, and make it close. And I don't think Miami, Ohio can really do that. Miami, Ohio is a faster-paced team, and I just think Akron is going to be able to do the same thing, and Akron is just better at it. I mean, Akron also is a fast-tempo team. They're just better at it than Miami, Ohio is. I've been saying I think Miami, Ohio is a little bit overrated, so I do like Akron in this one, and I think Akron deserves the bid, so hopefully they do get it. They're up from 6 to 6.5 with juice, 95% of tickets, 99% of the cash. Akron's been in the tournament multiple of the last few years. I think they have some turnover this year, though. I think a lot of the guys that were there last year were the same guys that were there 2 years prior, but I think a lot of those guys graduated. But still, Akron seems like they just kind of reloaded, and they have another really good team. They are the best team in the MAC. They're going to be public here, but it looks like the money is agreeing with the public in this one and driving the lineup. I don't like Miami, Ohio as much as Kent State. If Kent State was in this game, I might be looking towards maybe taking the points with Kent State, but with Miami, Ohio being the matchup again, Akron plays a similar style. They're just better at it. So I think the matchup is better for Akron than it would have been against Kent State. So that's the way I look there. The ACC final is down to Louisville and Duke. Duke down from 6.5 to 6. 68% of the cash coming in on Duke, 55% of the tickets. So even though the lines moved down on Duke, the cash is coming in on Duke. Duke, kind of similar situation to Houston, though, because Duke lost Cooper Flagg, as we know. He didn't play last night, and they had the injured player theory spot last night where Duke was blowing North Carolina out of the building. But then Duke, I don't know if they started to tire out or what it was, because Duke is a fairly deep team. I don't know if they tired out, but North Carolina got themselves right back in that game, and the game came down to a reffing call, man. That's just the way that it is. Duke committed a foul with a few seconds left, up 1 point, as North Carolina cut the game down to 1, coming back from a 24-point deficit. Duke fouled them, so North Carolina got 2 free throws. They missed the first one, so it's like, of course, this is what's going to happen. Then the North Carolina player made the second free throw, but it was called off on a lane violation, which really was a technicality. I mean, it was only technically it was true, but you never see that get called, man. So I hate it when it's like, it's a call that's just completely up to the ref's discretion as to whether or not they're going to call it. It never gets called. And to decide a game on that, that's just bullshit, man. It seemed like the fix was in for Duke there at that point. I think it's bullshit. After a game like that, I mean, it's a big rivalry game, too. I don't know, man, but Louisville looked really good in their win over Clemson. Clemson was winning the game early, and then Louisville turned it on and I think kind of ran away with it almost towards the end of the game. Actually, I think maybe it got close again towards the end, but Louisville had a big lead, I think, later in that game. So I don't know, man. Louisville hasn't even played Duke this season, I don't think. Duke lost the one time they played Clemson, and they haven't played Louisville at all. So the ACC, very top-heavy conference. Duke is the top team in the conference. Clemson and Louisville are the next two, and then everybody else is behind that. By the way, I think North Carolina's loss to Duke yesterday is going to mean that North Carolina is going to be bound for the NIT, and they're not going to make the tournament, and we'll see if they decline the invitation to the NIT. I hope they don't, because they're the type of team that I want to fade in the first round of the NIT. So I really hope they accept and they play in the NIT. Duke down from 6.5 to 6, as I was saying. Oh, it looks like the percentages are moving all over the place, man. I might lean at taking the points with Louisville here, man, because this is that second game without your injured star type of spot. Duke, they're going to be a 1 seed if they lose this game. It doesn't even matter, really. So I think Louisville might want to try to get this game more just because this is the first time they're playing Duke. And Duke, again, like I said, the only time they played this second tier of 2 teams in the ACC, Clemson and Louisville, they lost the game, although it was a road game at Clemson. Clemson is probably the better team over Louisville, though. I don't know if it's by that much, but Clemson, I think, is also the better defensive team over Louisville, so that's kind of the problem here. Where's Louisville at? Clemson's 18th in the country, man. A very balanced team, very good defensive team, and they slow the game down, although Duke also slows the game down. Let me see. So Clemson, I think, just has the ability to kind of hang around with Duke, although Louisville is actually really balanced offensively and defensively as well, but they play really, really fast, but they're also really high up in luck index. So that's kind of the problem. Clemson is the way less lucky team. So Ken Baum is telling you Louisville is not quite as good as they look based on the luck index. So I don't love that. The fact that Louisville plays fast, I mean, maybe they're going to try to do that, but Duke is still the better team, and Duke is probably going to be able to win out in the pacing and slow the game down. Again, as I always say, we will see. That game's in Charlotte, North Carolina as well. So Duke, obviously, their fan base is going to be there in huge numbers. Huntsville, Alabama is where the Conference USA final is now, which we've come down to the top two teams in the conference, I think, in my opinion, with Jacksonville State and Liberty. I think Liberty deserves the bid from this conference, man. I think they're the best team in the conference. They're up from 5 to 6 with juice. 74% of tickets, 85% of the cash coming in on Liberty. I like the Liberty side. Liberty had another escape against Kennesaw. I thought Liberty was going to play better against Kennesaw yesterday, and they escaped with the win, man. That was not the easiest game for them. But because Liberty was the favorite again, they escaped again. I think that's going to shock them into some more focus here, man. And Jacksonville State, they had the later of the two games yesterday. I think they also had a somewhat difficult matchup. I think they had to play against Middle Tennessee, right? Middle Tennessee is a pretty good team. So they had a more difficult matchup, and it was later in the day. So I do think I would lean to Liberty in that one. Then we have the game that I keep talking about in the Big West Championship in Henderson, Nevada. The top two teams in this conference have both made it. They were both huge favorites yesterday. UC Irvine won for me and covered in that game with a huge second half where they were able to turn it on and really speed that thing up. Big game for both teams yesterday. UC San Diego is good enough that people are talking about that they might actually qualify for an at-large, although I kind of hope they do, because I think we want to see this team in the tournament, man. They're a fun team to watch. They're really good. They pass the ball around on offense. They have really good ball movement. This is a really good offense of UC San Diego, and they're actually really balanced this year, too. Their defense was their big problem last year, and that was where UC Irvine had a big advantage over UC San Diego last year. And, of course, neither team made the tournament out of this conference last year. UC San Diego was ineligible. And then UC Irvine lost to Long Beach State, who wound up making the tournament. And they had that spark from having the coach be fired, yet he was still coaching. I don't know, man. But now we got a situation where UC San Diego is much better defensively this year. They're a very balanced team. They're up from 4.5 to 6 with juice here. 66% of tickets, 79% of the cash coming in on UCSD here. So the odds makers are telling you UC San Diego is the better team. But then if Irvine wins, it is going to be a discussion whether or not UC San Diego gets in. And I hate calling them San Diego because San Diego University, University of San Diego is a totally different school in the WCC. So UC San Diego is this team. UCSD is really what we should call them. So I think UC San Diego should win. They had the earlier game last night, I'm pretty sure, and it was the game that was a little bit less in question, although by the end of it, both games are just easy wins for these two teams. UC San Diego is the better of these two teams. They deserve to get into the tournament, man. Hopefully they do, because they're the team. They might have too much hype on them, though. I don't love teams that get like a ton of hype as like a sleeper, like Cinderella candidate, but they're like massively hyped. But I still want to see UC San Diego in the tournament, man, and they are a dangerous team. They could beat some of the big boys for sure. They're like somewhere in like the top 35 in Ken Baum's rankings. So this is a good team. UC Irvine is in like the 60s. So the only thing is that UC Irvine needs to win this game to get into the tournament. But I think UC San Diego probably is of that mindset as well. I don't think they really think they're going to qualify for an at-large, and I don't really think they will either. So both teams do need to win this. And this is UC San Diego's first shot at even being eligible because they were going through the transition period to Division I. So that's kind of crazy. And in their first year where they're eligible, they're the best team in the conference and they have the chance to do it. Hopefully they do. In the WAC tournament in Las Vegas at the Orleans, we got a lot of Las Vegas action here. Grand Canyon and Utah Valley State. This is the 2 seed against the 1 seed, although Grand Canyon, despite being the 2 seed, is actually the better team. That's been the case all year. They should be able to win this game, in my opinion, but it is a close line here somewhat. Grand Canyon's up from 3 to 4.5 with juice, though. So the money is coming in on Grand Canyon. 62% of tickets, 74% of cash coming in on them. Grand Canyon has won this conference, I think, a couple years in a row. So Utah Valley State might, have a little bit of extra motivation for that reason. I think Grand Canyon might have played the later of the two games last night as well. Both teams won, obviously, to get here. Again, I do think Grand Canyon is the better of these two teams. They split the regular season meetings with the home team winning each game, I think, which is not that much of a surprise. But again, in this game, Grand Canyon, they're also the team with more pedigree here, so I would lean to them. What else we got? What are we talking about here? Charles, what's up, man? Clint, we got to get him back on Better Off Dead for the NBA playoffs. I think we might have him. Maybe I'll try to get him back on. That's all right, man. I knew what you meant. On better. I knew what you meant. When is Clint going to get better? When is he going to build back better? I don't know. All right. In the American East, this game is up at 11. So this is in a half hour, man. This is a tournament where the top seed actually hosts in their home arena. So this game is at Bryant, which is in Rhode Island. Maine at Bryant. Maine got here, man. I'm rooting for Maine, dude, even though they're not the better team, and I usually like to see the better team get into the NCAA tournament. I just still like Maine after AJ Lopez, their guy there, taunted NJIT's crowd of field-tripping 8-year-olds there. I just thought it was hilarious. Bryant, however, I think is probably going to get this done. They're on their home floor. They're up from 7 to 7 with juice. 81% of tickets, 92% of the cash coming in on Bryant. Bryant is the best team in this conference. Maine pulled off a kind of a crazy upset on the road at Vermont, and Vermont just really didn't shoot well at all in that game. Yeah, Maine played really well defensively too, but some of it was, I think, just outlier bad shooting for Vermont as well. That was a bigger win for Maine. Beating Vermont, knocking out the team that's won this conference like every year in recent memory, getting rid of them. Huge win for Maine. Bryant, whoever they played, I don't even remember who they played. Albany, I guess. Bryant had like an easier opponent in the last round as well, but I don't know that matters as much because this tournament is spaced out a bit, so these teams have a lot of rest. These teams have not played for like a few days now at least, so both teams are pretty well rested here. Maine lost both regular season matchups to Bryant, and they lost pretty badly on this floor to Bryant. So again, we'll see what happens, but Bryant is just the better team. The money is coming in on them. And then we do have the MEAC Championship. The top two teams in this conference have made it. South Carolina State and Norfolk State. Everybody kind of knows Norfolk State because they win this championship. They win this conference a lot. They are the best team in this conference, but South Carolina State's come from kind of out of nowhere. And this game is in Norfolk, and I think it might be at Norfolk State's home arena. And if that's the case, the odds makers are actually telling you they're not even the better team. They're up from a pick'em to a 1.5. 60% of tickets, 68% of the cash coming into Norfolk, though. So the money is coming in on them. The market read is on them. But I just find it a little bit crazy that the line is that low. I was expecting like 3.5 maybe, because maybe I just haven't been looking at the Ken Palm's rankings for these MEAC teams, because I thought that Norfolk State was fairly significantly the best team in this conference, but it looks like that's not the case. South Carolina State has been lined like a pretty good team. They've been like double-digit favorites in some of the games in this tournament, so they're pretty good as well. Probably would still lean to Norfolk State just because they do have the pedigree. The market read does look like it's on them, but that's not a sure thing at all. We're finishing with the huge bangers here, man, with that and then the SWAC, which is tonight. Alabama State and Jackson State are the teams that have gotten here. Jackson State is the better of these two teams. This is a neutral game in Atlanta, Georgia, neutral site. Jackson State up from 2.5 to 3.5 to 3 with juice. Not to be confused with Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State, by the way, is actually in Alabama. It's not in Jacksonville, Florida. Jackson State, I actually forget where Jackson State is. I don't know if it's in Jackson, Mississippi or not. I actually don't remember at all. Maybe it's not. But they're up from 2.5 to 3 here. 75% of tickets, 87% of the cash. Money coming in on Jackson State. I agree with it. They're the better team over Alabama State. Jackson State, they, as I mentioned before, they played a gauntlet out-of-conference schedule where they didn't win any out-of-conference game, and they faced one of the most difficult out-of-conference schedules out of any team in the nation. So it's absolutely insane. They came into conference play with like an 0-13 record, and then they were one of the best teams in conference play in this conference. So I think that gauntlet out of conference definitely battle tested them. So they are pretty battle tested. So that makes me kind of lean to them in this game as well. And that's it for college basketball, man. Those are all the games, I'm pretty sure, right? Let's go to NHL here. Yeah, it would be cool if Maine won. I mean, they're never, I don't know, when's the last time they made the tournament? Have they made it ever? I don't even know. Let's go to NHL. I got one play today. A lot of these games just don't really interest me a whole lot. I mean, some of these games are just huge lines. New Jersey and Pittsburgh. I mean, New Jersey, they're sitting pretty well as far as getting a playoff spot right now. They're not even in a wild card spot right now, so they're looking pretty good. They are coming off pretty big wins over Columbus, who's fighting to get into the playoffs, and then Edmonton. Huge win there for New Jersey. Now they got to go on the road. So, yeah, technically it is the start of a road trip where you do tend to be focused, but when it's a pretty bad team like Pittsburgh, I don't know that you're really going to be that focused. And then they do have Columbus up next, which is a bigger game against a team that is fighting for a playoff spot. So the spot doesn't look very good for New Jersey. Slightly into Pittsburgh here. Pittsburgh beat me in the previous game in what was a bad spot. And St. Louis completely outshot them. I just don't know how I lost that bet. I don't know how St. Louis lost that game in a very good situation. Pittsburgh's been using Jari in net again. I don't know if Nedeljkovic is hurt or what the deal is, but Jari is not that good a goalie, but they've won 3 straight games with them somehow. I don't know. I don't know if he's even going to be their goalie in this game. No idea. But I still think the spot's not great for New Jersey, but the money is coming in on them. They're up from minus 140 to minus 143, 67% of tickets, 89% of the cash coming in on them. And yeah, they're certainly the better team, but the spot doesn't look that great for them. Tampa is at my Bruins, and we know what the deal is here, man. Tampa's lost 3 in a row, losing to Philadelphia in their last game, which is a pretty bad loss. I mean, Philadelphia is not good. Losing to Carolina on the road, you can excuse that. Carolina's good. But that 3-game loss streak started with that ugly 4-0 loss in Tampa at the hands of the Boston Bruins. So Tampa's got quick road revenge here. So I do lean to Tampa for that reason, but you would have to lay a huge road price, which I'm not really willing to do, because the Bruins are also coming off an ugly loss themselves. So I think they're going to show up as well. But this game was really misleading, that 4-0 game. It was 1-0 in the third period, and the Bruins were playing motivated because it was the first game after the Marchand trade. Bruins scored like this ridiculous goal from almost center ice. There was just this weird fluky thing. And then I think they had one empty netter at the end as well. So a little bit of a misleading result there. The Bruins coming off a really ugly loss, I think, to Ottawa. Yeah, 6-3. So they're kind of in bounce back mode as well. And I mentioned I liked Ottawa in that game. I kind of wish I played it because the Bruins are coming off those 2 big wins, not only against Tampa, but also over Florida, which Marchand didn't return in that game because he was hurt. But he may have been at the game, so maybe he got the standing ovation and whatever. I don't know. So it was a big emotional game for the Bruins regardless, though, and then they had a big letdown after that. So both teams are kind of in spots where I expect them to be focused, but I think Tampa, the revenge angle is a little bit stronger here, and that's kind of the way you want to look, and they're the way better team. I mean, this is a sad state of affairs for the Bruins where they're this big of an underdog at home. Tampa down from minus 180 to minus 174, 81% of tickets, 97% of the cash on them. Yeah, I like the Tampa side, but I'm not willing to lay that much of a price with it. I don't know if Maine has ever been in the tournament either, man. It's always Vermont out of that conference. Ottawa and Toronto, the big battle of Ontario here. Toronto, obviously, is in a much better position as far as they're like definitely going to make the playoffs. Ottawa's on a nice run, and they're still fighting to try to make the playoffs. Toronto returned home and lost to Florida, but usually in a return home spot, I like to say, well, you return home, you're usually in a distracted spot, and then if you have a bad game, then you usually play better in your next game. I don't think that's really what we're seeing here because they played Florida. That was a big game, a close one-goal loss there. So I don't really know that I would say that Toronto's really in a positive spot coming off of that big game. I think Ottawa still needs the game more because they're trying to get into the playoffs. They're on a huge win streak here, 5-game win streak. I think they're going to show up again for this. They're starting a road trip with momentum, kind of against like the bigger brother in the province of Ontario. So I like Ottawa in this one. Toronto's down from minus 135 to minus 133. 55% of the tickets on them, but 51% of the cash on the Ottawa side. I agree with that move and with that market percentage on that one. I agree, and I like the Ottawa side there. Rangers are playing Columbus. This is an interesting one because these teams are fighting to try to get into the playoffs, man. Both these teams trying to get wild card spots. And it's kind of a quick road revenge for the Rangers because they lost at home 7-3 to Columbus on March 9th. That is a horrendous loss for the Rangers. But the problem that I have with this is that the Rangers are playing a third straight road game, coming off playing Winnipeg pretty tough and then winning in overtime against Minnesota. Now they got this game, and they do have Edmonton tomorrow as well. I don't think the Rangers are going to overlook Columbus, though, after what Columbus just did to them and the fact that this is a game where the teams are fighting to try to get into the playoffs. So that means both teams are going to show up, though. So the Rangers are probably in the worst rest spot, though. Columbus is just staying at home, and they got destroyed in their last game by Vegas. So I don't think this is a bad spot. In fact, that was the return home spot, and they got killed in the return home spot. So when you return home, like I say, sometimes it's a distraction. You have family life to get back to, and that kind of distracts from your trying to focus on the game. Maybe they didn't care that much about a Western Conference team, even though it is Vegas. Vegas is good. Maybe they were looking ahead to this game a little bit with the Rangers. So I don't think this is a negative spot for Columbus. I think this is a spot where both teams are going to show up. Rangers down from -135 to -130, 65% of tickets on them, 56% of the cash on Columbus. So the market read is on the Columbus side, at least as far as it stands right now. I would probably look towards the under in this game, actually, even though I don't do a whole lot with totals, just because this is a big battle between two teams that are trying to make the playoffs. And the last game that we saw against these teams was a 7-3 game, so 10 goals were scored. So the fact that 10 goals were scored, that might have people thinking, oh, this is going to be another high-scoring game here. The hesitation I would have with the under here is that Columbus is definitely an over team. I mean, their goaltending is not that good. Their defense is not that good, and their offense is good. So we will see what happens there. So I don't really want to do it, but 50% of the tickets and 87% of the cash on the under. Total is 6, juice to the over, gone down a little bit. Pretty high total because it is Columbus involved in this game, and maybe because of the high-scoring previous game. But that's not the game that I'm going to get involved in. The game I'm going to get involved in is to go right back to my abusive girlfriend here, the St. Louis Blues, who are giving me the blues. They lost their last game in a game they should not have lost at all. Now they're basically a road favorite again here, and I'm going right back to the well and playing them again because I think that was a misleading result. They completely dominated the shots in that game and wound up being an ugly loss against a not very good Pittsburgh team. I think St. Louis is going to show up focused here against Minnesota, man. This is a big game. St. Louis is trying to get into the playoffs, man, and Minnesota is much more secure in their playoff spot here. So this is a big game for St. Louis, man, more so than it is for Minnesota, in my opinion. St. Louis definitely needs this game more. It is also a divisional game, but Minnesota's 10 points above St. Louis right now. So St. Louis just fighting for the wild card right now. Minnesota is in the top wild card spot, but there's such a gap between them and the other wild card teams that I think this game does mean less to them. They're coming off 2 straight overtime shootout games, beating Colorado, losing to the Rangers, 2 big wins, big games there. And they got the LA Kings up next, and the LA Kings have been playing pretty well as well, so that's a big game as well against a team with a better record as well. And the LA Kings actually are tied point-wise with Minnesota, I think, whereas now they're playing a St. Louis team that's 10 points lower. Give me St. Louis in this game, man. And looking at the market read, at least when I looked up before, it looked good for playing St. Louis. Let me see here. Where are we at? St. Louis has flipped from +102 to -107, so they've flipped to the favorite. 61% of the cash coming in on them, 56% of tickets on Minnesota. So again, the market read looks like it's on the Blues. I like the Blues there for those reasons I just said. I think they need the game more as well, and the spot sets up better for them. Market read hopefully stays that way because I want it to agree with me. I mean, if the market agrees with me, it just kind of validates my thinking. So I like that. So give me the Blues, baby. Doctor, give me the news, or give me the Blues in this case. Let's go to NBA. I mean, I always talk about my Boston teams. Boston Celtics, they're on a back-to-back. They pulled away and won against Miami last night. And I mentioned I didn't love the Celtics to cover that game. It was a pretty close game for most of it, and the Celtics pulled away. I mean, this Miami team, not that great right now, and the Celtics dominate that series with Miami anyway, and they were able to get it done again. But now the Celtics are in a back-to-back, playing 3 games in 4 days, all in different cities, and also 4 games in 6, 5 and 8. 6 in 10 days, 7 games in 11 days, although most of them were at home. Doesn't look like the greatest spot, man, on a back-to-back, so I don't want to come in and try to do anything with the Celtics here. Brooklyn, coming off that game against Chicago where they lost, kind of an ugly loss. I was on Chicago in that game because that was sandwiched in between Lakers, Cleveland, and Boston. So that was a sandwich spot for Brooklyn. They played really tough against LA and Cleveland, beating LA, which I was on Brooklyn in that one. I don't think this is strong enough for me to come in and play Brooklyn, but I don't like the Celtics in this spot. They're pretty public, 91% of tickets, although 97% of the cash. I don't really think the cash percentage is actually going to wind up being on them. They're down from 12 to 10, laying a big road number here against a Brooklyn team that if they're going to get up for games for the remainder of the season, it's going to be games like this where they're hosting the returning champ Boston Celtics. The game I am going to play, though, is my lover, the Detroit Pistons, who 2 years ago, they were my favorite team to bet, and it seemed like they won outright every time I bet them as an underdog 2 years ago, and they only had like 11 wins on the season, and I think 8 of them were betting wins for me. So Detroit was very good to me, and they've been okay to me this year, too. I've won the last couple of times I've played them as an underdog. I think they're good to play as an underdog, and they're an underdog here, and they're up against Oklahoma City, but this line keeps moving down. I think maybe we're going to see Oklahoma City maybe rest some guys here because this looks way too easy to lay the points with the Thunder here, man. Everybody's anointing the Thunder as like the NBA champs right now after what they just did to the Celtics. Thunder down from 7 to 4.5 here. 77% of tickets, 65% of the cash, so they're public. They're a road favorite and less of the cash coming in on them, and we see reverse movement coming in. Obviously, I wish I was there to get the 7 because that's a key number in basketball where teams stop intentionally fouling at that point because it's the 3-possession score where they stop doing it. But this is all about the spot, man. I think 5 is still good. You're still getting points at home. I like this. Like I said, the Thunder are coming off beating the Celtics, man. In the prior 2 games, they played against Denver twice. So those are 2 big games as well. Beat the Celtics. Now they're continuing the road trip, and tomorrow they got to face Milwaukee, and that's a bigger game as well. I mean, that's Giannis. Milwaukee has the better record. They are the team that has more name recognition behind them. They are the team with more playoff pedigree. This Detroit team still, I don't think, really grabs your focus, especially when it's between Boston and Milwaukee. So I think it's a sandwich spot, and because this is a back-to-back, I think Oklahoma City may rest some guys here and throw their focus on this Milwaukee game because Oklahoma City, I think they've pretty much guaranteed themselves they're going to be the 1 seed. They have such a good record. So I think they might overlook Detroit here, man. And that game against the Celtics, by the way, I think there was some biased reffing going on in that game, and that score was a little bit misleading. The Celtics could have won this game. The whole tale of this game was the free throws. Look at the free throw difference in this game. Oklahoma City had 35 free throw attempts in the game. The Celtics had 12. So what the fuck is the deal with that? The Celtics had 94 field goal attempts to Oklahoma City's 82. So the Celtics had way more possessions. The Celtics had 7 more three-pointers made in this game. And they lost the game because Oklahoma City had 15 more free throws than they did and made. And they had whatever that is. Am I doing that math right? Yeah, and they had 23 more free throw attempts than the Celtics did. So I think this is a misleading result, man. The free throw discrepancy was insane in this game. Look at the game otherwise. I mean, percentages are fairly close. Everything else is fairly close. I know it wound up being a close game in the end, but that free throw discrepancy was absolutely absurd in the game. I think it was kind of a misleading result. Biased reffing, and then let's just make this game even better. What's Detroit coming off of? Detroit's, in the playoff hunt here. I think they're playing to try to make sure they avoid the play-ins and whatever. What are we even looking at here with Detroit? Yeah, Detroit's trying to avoid the play-ins still, man. Even though they do have a decent gap here, a 5-game lead over Atlanta, so they're feeling pretty decent here, but still, I think they might want to avoid Cleveland too. So Detroit, they're only 1 game back of being in 4th place. So Detroit is still playing for seeding here, so they have reason to play. they're going to show up with Oklahoma City coming into their place as well. And on top of all that, they just lost to the Washington Wizards, man. Like one of the worst losses you could possibly have. That was at home on this floor. So I think they're going to be angry. They're going to bounce back. I think they were looking ahead to Oklahoma City, man. And they'd just beaten Washington the game before that. So it was a zigzag spot where Washington had like an advantage in that Washington had all the adjustments to make in that game. That's what happens in the zigzag. So I think this is a positive spot for Detroit. Terrible spot for the Thunder. Give me the Detroit Pistons plus the points, baby. One of my ugly underdogs, man. I love it. Miami and Memphis. I mean, Memphis is a huge favorite. Miami played pretty tough against Boston last night, so they're in a back-to-back. But Memphis played Cleveland last night, so they're in a back-to-back. But that game was actually in hand. Miami actually had the more close game. They were like in that game against Boston into the fourth quarter. Cleveland had a big lead against Memphis, so Memphis wasn't really in that game, so I would lean to Memphis looking at this game. Memphis up from 7 to 8, 85% of tickets, 93% of the cash on them. I think Memphis would be the way to look, even though both teams are in back-to-backs. Milwaukee has a little bit of revenge in mind here, as they just lost at Indiana a couple of days ago. Now they're coming back, and they got to play Indiana again, the team that beat them. The problem I have with this is that Milwaukee's coming off a real satisfying win against LA, the Lakers, even though that was the LeBron-less Lakers. That was still a big win for Milwaukee. And I think Luka might have gotten hurt in that game or something too, but still a big win nonetheless over the LA Lakers for Milwaukee. So I don't quite want to come in and play Milwaukee when they're coming off a big win like that, even though it is revenge for them. So Milwaukee may have the adjustments to make. Indiana is on a back-to-back, actually. They played at Philadelphia last night, so Milwaukee does have the rest edge. So even though Milwaukee's coming off the win over LA, I actually would still lean to Milwaukee if you forced my hand on this game. Bucks up from 5.5 to 5.5 with juice. 75% of tickets, 80% of the cash. So the money looks like it is coming in agreement with me on that on the Bucks side. Then we got the other big game. This is the ABC game of the night, the primetime matchup. The New York Knicks at Golden State, but we're looking at the Knicks without Jalen Brunson. So Golden State, I mean, that's unfortunate. Golden State, a pretty big favorite, up from 5.5 to 7. 90% of the tickets, 96% of the cash coming in on Golden State. So the line is moving on Golden State. The Knicks are already out on the Pacific Coast, but kind of weird that they had to go up to Portland, and now they're coming back down to basically where they just were in Sacramento. But they're staying on the Pacific Coast with 2 days off, and they barely beat Portland. Portland took them into overtime, so maybe that was kind of a sandwich spot because that was a really satisfying win. I think blowing out Sacramento, I was satisfied because I was on the Knicks in that game. And then the Knicks had Golden State up next, so I think maybe they overlooked Portland, but also that game against Sacramento was kind of the injured player theory spot with Brunson out, even though he had missed the previous game. The previous game was a back-to-back, so I think it came into play in this game. I got it right. Then I think they had kind of that like little bit of a letdown. I do think you're going to see the Knicks show up in this game against Golden State, though. Is it going to be enough? I don't know. Golden State, I mean, they're not exactly in a terrible spot, though. They just crushed Sacramento as well. Also beat Portland. They're on a roll right now. Won 7 games in a row or whatever that is. 6. It's my stroke, man. I can't focus. My vision can't focus anymore. And they've won, 11 of their last 12 games. So Golden State really on a roll, basically, since they got Jimmy Butler. They do have Denver up next. I don't really know if they're going to overlook the Knicks, but the one thing is that this is revenge for the Knicks from a game back on March 4th where Golden State went into the Knicks and beat the Knicks, and that was when the Knicks had Brunson. So it is a bit of a revenge spot for the Knicks here. Knicks have a little bit of extra rest. Maybe it is possible Golden State overlooks the Knicks a little bit. I wouldn't want to try to play Golden State here, man. I would probably look to actually take the points with the Knicks or pass on it. I'm going to pass, obviously, but Golden State also kind of too public for my liking, even though it does look like the money is coming in on that side. And that's going to do it, man. Let's get this out before the 11 games start. Nobody's going to watch this game. I watched this video before then, but my plays one more time. College basketball, Cornell -5.5. Blues in hockey -110. Or whatever the best numbers you can get, obviously. And NBA, Detroit +5. That's going to do it for me. You don't like the Knicks. I don't even hate the Knicks, even though I'm a Celtics fan. I hate the Lakers way more. I probably dislike the Cavs way more at this point because they're more of the threat, but I've never really hated the Knicks, man. I don't know. Even when they were kind of that rivalry, it was always like the Detroit Pistons. I don't hate the Pistons anymore, but I hated them in like the late 80s because they ended the Celtics dynasty, and they had those real assholes on their team, Bill Laimbeer, Isaiah Thomas. They're all horrible. Like, they're big time assholes, man. So that is part of the reason why I was a fan of Michael Jordan and the Bulls, because they stopped the Pistons. But still, MJ is the GOAT, man. He's better than LeBron, way more clutch. If MJ didn't like take time off and have issues with gambling and whatever, the Bulls would have won 8 straight championships instead of 6 out of 8. Yeah, Isaiah Thomas, definitely an asshole. He still is. He's definitely a douche. They would foul like crazy because they would try to get away with it. So that's what they did. They were the most physical team, and that's how they beat the Celtics. Even though the Celtics were actually a fairly physical team in that era, the Pistons out-physicaled them, and it was kind of towards the end of the Celtics era. They were getting a little bit older. So, yeah, I mean, that's the way that it went. And then Michael Jordan, like, got himself jacked up, like, built up his muscle so that he could be physical and out-physical Detroit. So that's how that whole thing went. It's all about physicality, or at least it was back then when the NBA was better in the 90s. That's going to do it. Good luck to all of you as well. Thanks, guys, for hanging out. Tower Gang Tone on Twitter, patreon.com/Tower Gang for the most offensive podcast out there, bonus content and all that good stuff. That's going to do it. Thanks again, guys. Peace.